Hey guys, tonight we're taking a journey into the hazy, intoxicating, and often treacherous world of the American West's other great frontier, the one inside the mind. When we think of the Wild West, we picture dusty cowboys drinking straight whiskey in a smoky saloon. But that's only one small, simple chapter in a much larger, stranger story. The 19th century was a world awash in substances that could alter your reality, and they weren't just found in a shot glass. They were in the medicine cabinet, the doctor's bag, the travelling salesman's wagon, and even in the sacred ceremonies of the people who had called these lands home for millennia. This was an era before regulation, before warning labels, before the very concepts of recreational versus medicinal had been clearly defined. Getting high wasn't just a back-alley vice. It was a mainstream, socially acceptable, and sometimes even prescribed part of daily life, with consequences few could have ever imagined. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, I love seeing our global community take shape, so please drop a comment to let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's a fascinating reminder of how these stories connect us across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We are about to explore what getting high was really like in the Wild West, and you'll soon discover that the most dangerous territory wasn't the open range, but the uncharted wilderness of the human body and mind. In the 19th century American West, the line between medicine and mind-altering drug was not just blurry, it was non-existent. The most potent, addictive, and reality-bending substances of the age were not sought out in shadowy dens of vice, but purchased openly at the general store, prescribed by doctors, and administered with loving care to screaming babies and ailing grandparents. This was the golden age of the patent medicine, a time when the most reliable cure for the hardships of life came in a bottle, promising relief but often delivering a lifetime of bondage. Imagine you are a respectable woman living in a small prairie town in the 1880s. You are the pillar of your family, the keeper of the home, but you are also exhausted. The physical toll of running a household without modern conveniences, the emotional strain of child rearing, the constant, gnawing loneliness of frontier life, it all accumulates into a state of what was then called nervous exhaustion, or neurasthenia. You suffer from headaches, backaches, insomnia, and a deep, weary sadness that has no name. You visit the town doctor, or perhaps you simply go to the local apothecary. You describe your symptoms. He nods knowingly and sells you a small dark bottle. The label is simple: laudanum. You take your first dose, a few drops in a glass of water or tea, as instructed. The taste is bitter, almost shockingly so, a harsh, medicinal flavor that makes you grimace. But then, within 20 minutes, a miracle unfolds. A slow, warm wave begins to spread from your stomach through your entire body. The gnawing ache in your back dissolves into a distant memory. The frantic, anxious thoughts in your mind slow down, soften, and drift away like clouds. A profound sense of calm, of serene, detached well-being settles over you. The world is still harsh, but it no longer touches you. You are floating, peaceful, and blissfully numb. For the first time in months, you feel not just relief, but a quiet, liquid happiness. This was the experience of millions in the 19th century. Laudanum was a tincture of opium, meaning opium dissolved in alcohol. It was the era's wonder drug, the all-purpose remedy for nearly every ailment imaginable. Was your baby screaming inconsolably from the pain of teething? A few drops of laudanum on the gums or in a bit of sugar water would quiet the child into a deep, unnervingly still sleep. Did you have a hacking cough or severe diarrhea, a common and often fatal ailment known as the flux? Laudanum would suppress the cough and halt the bowels with remarkable efficiency. Did you suffer from female complaints, the vague but debilitating pain of menstrual cramps or menopause? Laudanum was the prescribed answer. It was cheap, legal, and as easy to purchase as flour or sugar. It was seen not as a dangerous narcotic, but as a household staple, a mother's trusted friend. Women, in particular, became the primary consumers of laudanum. In an era when it was considered unladylike for a woman to drink alcohol, laudanum offered a socially acceptable, private means of chemical comfort. The fainting spells and delicate nerves of Victorian women were often the direct result of chronic, low-level opiate use. These women weren't seeking a thrilling high. They were desperately seeking relief from the very real physical and psychological pains of their existence. The laudanum didn't solve the underlying problems, the loneliness, the oppressive social roles, the lack of medical care, but it made them bearable. It draped a warm, velvety curtain between the user and the sharp edges of reality. But the dream in the bottle had a dark, insidious secret. The relief it provided was temporary, and the price it exacted was immense. You find that you need to take the laudanum every day just to feel normal. The dose that once brought you bliss now barely keeps the withdrawal symptoms at bay. If you try to stop, your body revolts. The gentle warmth is replaced by a bone-deep cold sweat. The peaceful calm shatters into excruciating anxiety and agitation. Your muscles cramp, your stomach churns, and the pain you were trying to escape returns with a vengeance, magnified tenfold. You are trapped in a cycle of needing the drug simply to avoid the agony of not having it. You have become, without ever intending to, an opium addict. You are trapped. Your life now revolves around securing your next dose, hiding your habit from your husband and your neighbors, your shame growing with every drop you consume. Your world, once expanded by the drug's warm embrace, has now shrunk to the size of that small, dark bottle. You are one of the countless opium eaters of the 19th century, a respectable victim of a medicine that promised heaven and delivered a quiet, private hell. While laudanum was a simple compound, the true Wild West of pharmaceuticals lay in the world of patent medicines. These were branded, pre-packaged remedies that made spectacular claims, their names and labels a testament to the marketing genius of the age. They were the original direct-to-consumer products, and their secret ingredients were often the most powerful drugs known to man. Imagine the arrival of a medicine show in your town, an event we've touched upon before, but one whose importance cannot be overstated. It was the Super Bowl, the rock concert, and the TED Talk of its day, all rolled into one. The professor, on his brightly painted stage, wasn't just a salesman, he was a master of psychology. He understood your fears, the fear of sickness, of aging, of death, of social inadequacy, and he offered you a single, simple solution, contained within a handsomely labelled bottle. Let's look closer at his wares. Perhaps he's selling Aya's cherry pectoral for your cough. Its advertising promises gentle, soothing relief. The label, if you could analyse it, would reveal it contained heroin. Or maybe he offers Gelinos Drages, a remedy for neuralgia and sleeplessness. The active ingredient? Bromide, a potent sedative. But the real stars of the show were the new wonder drugs, cocaine and morphine, expertly blended into irresistible concoctions. While laudanum offered escape, these promised power. Picture yourself as a writer, a student, or a businessman feeling the strain of long hours and mental fatigue. You feel sluggish, uninspired, unable to focus. You see an advertisement in a magazine for a wonderful new beverage, Vin Mariani. It's a French tonic wine, endorsed by popes, kings, and famous inventors like Thomas Edison. The ads promise it will restore health, strength, energy, and vitality. You purchase a bottle. It tastes like a sweet, rich red wine, but with a strange, slightly numbing aftertaste. You drink a glass. The effect is almost immediate and utterly transformative. The fog of fatigue in your brain evaporates. You feel sharp, witty, and brilliantly articulate. Ideas flow effortlessly. A surge of confidence and optimism washes over you. You could work for hours without tiring, talk for hours without stumbling. You feel, in short, like the best possible version of yourself. This feeling is, of course, the effect of the wine's secret ingredient, a potent extract of the coca leaf, the raw source of cocaine. Vin Mariani was essentially a bottle of coca-infused Bordeaux, and it was wildly popular, a socially acceptable way to get a powerful stimulant boost. The most common and perhaps most disturbing use of cocaine was aimed at the most vulnerable of consumers, children. Imagine your toddler is suffering from a painful toothache. You go to the pharmacy and buy a small bottle of Coca-Cola toothache drops. The label promises instantaneous cure. You dip your finger in the sweet liquid and rub it on your child's gums. The crying stops almost instantly. The child, moments ago writhing in pain, becomes calm and happy. You are relieved. You believe you have found a miracle. What you have just done is apply a potent solution of pure cocaine directly to your child's gums. The powerful anesthetic numbed the pain instantly, and the euphoric effects of the drug did the rest. Cocaine was the wonder ingredient of the 1880s and 90s. It was found not just in wine and toothache drops, but in throat lozenges, hay fever remedies, and even in early formulations of the most famous soft drink in the world, Coca-Cola. The original 1886 recipe contained a significant amount of coca leaf extract, marketed as a brain tonic and intellectual beverage. But the true king of the patent medicine cabinet, the ingredient that promised the deepest peace, was morphine. Its delivery system had been revolutionized by the Civil War, the hypodermic syringe. This new technology allowed for the direct injection of morphine into the bloodstream, providing relief from pain that was swift, total, and profoundly addictive. The soldier's disease, or morphine addiction, was a silent epidemic among veterans. But you didn't need a needle to get your dose. The most popular remedies for children were the soothing syrups. Imagine again that young mother at her wit's end. Her baby is screaming from colic. She reaches for the small bottle on the shelf. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup. The label calls it the mother's friend. She pours a spoonful of the thick, sweet syrup and gives it to the infant. The effect is swift and dramatic. The crying ceases. The baby's tense body relaxes. Its eyes glaze over, and within minutes it sinks into a deep, profound sleep that will last for hours. The mother breathes a sigh of relief. Peace has been restored. She believes the syrup is a gentle, herbal remedy. She has no idea she has just given her child a potent dose of morphine sulfate. Products like Mrs. Winslow's, Cop's Baby's Friend, and Godfrey's Cordial were sold by the millions. They were a cocktail of morphine, alcohol, and other sedatives, and they were lethally effective. They didn't soothe the baby's pain. They rendered the child semi-comatose. Overdoses were tragically common. A slightly too large dose could easily suppress an infant's respiratory system, causing the child to simply stop breathing in its sleep. Many of the unexplained crib deaths of the era were likely due to these opiate-laced syrups. Children who were given these syrups regularly developed a tolerance and then a full-blown addiction. They would become listless, malnourished, opium babies, their growth stunted, their minds foggy. And just as this generation was grappling with morphine, a new miracle drug appeared on the scene. In the late 1890s, the German pharmaceutical company Bayer began marketing a new cough suppressant. They claimed it was powerful, effective, and, most remarkably, non-addictive. They even suggested it could be used to cure morphine addiction. They called this new wonder drug heroin. The cycle of medical deception and mass addiction was poised to begin all over again, sold to an unsuspecting public, one bottle at a time. While opiates and cocaine operated in the quiet spaces of the home and the medicine cabinet, the undisputed king of mind-altering substances in the Wild West held its court in public, in the loud, smoky, and volatile world of the saloon. Alcohol was the social lubricant, the economic engine, and the primary fuel for the violence and chaos that defined so much of frontier life. And alongside it was its constant companion, tobacco, a substance so ubiquitous it was more a part of the atmosphere than a mere consumer product. Push open the swinging doors of a typical frontier saloon. The sensory assault is immediate. The air is a thick, blue haze of tobacco smoke, so dense it stings your eyes. The smell is a complex bouquet of stale beer, spilled whiskey, unwashed bodies, and the faint, sharp tang of sawdust and spit. The noise is a constant roar. The clinking of glasses, the rumble of male voices, the rhythmic thump of a faro dealer's casebox, and the tinny, out-of-tune plinking of a piano in the corner. You belly up to the long wooden bar, its surface scarred with 1,000 cigarette burns and whiskey rings. You ask the bartender for a whiskey. He grabs a thick, greasy glass, gives it a perfunctory wipe with a dirty rag, and sloshes a measure of amber liquid into it. The cost? 2 bits, or 25 cents. You take a sip. It is fire. It burns a path down your throat and hits your stomach like a hot rock. This is not a smooth, aged, sipping whiskey. This is coffin varnish, tarantula juice, or 40 rod, so named because it was said to be powerful enough to kill a man at 40 rods distance. What are you actually drinking? It's a gamble. At best, it's a young, raw, unaged grain alcohol, sometimes called white dog, with no time to mellow in a barrel. At worst, it's a toxic chemical cocktail. To stretch their supply and increase profits, Unscrupulous saloon owners would dilute this raw alcohol with water and then add other ingredients to restore its color and bite. A splash of burnt sugar, caramel, or even tobacco spit for an amber hue. A dash of chili powder, black pepper, or even gunpowder to mimic the kick of real whiskey. And sometimes, for an extra jolt or a supposed medicinal property, a bit of ammonia, turpentine, cayenne, or strychnine. This wasn't a beverage, it was a chemical weapon. The immediate effects were rapid intoxication and a burning stomach. The long-term effects could include blindness, paralysis, and organ failure. Yet, men drank it. They drank it to wash away the trail dust, to numb the pain of a hard life, to celebrate a lucky strike, or to drown the sorrow of a failed one. Drinking was not just a pastime, it was a central ritual of masculinity. To be able to hold your liquor was a mark of honor. To refuse a drink was a potential insult. Business deals were sealed over a shared bottle. Friendships were forged in a drunken haze. The saloon was far more than just a bar. In a town with few public buildings, it was the de facto community center. It was the post office, where you'd pick up your mail. It was the bank, where a trusted saloon owner might hold your money for safekeeping. It was the courthouse, where a traveling judge might hold informal hearings. It was the political headquarters, where candidates gave speeches and votes were bought with free drinks. It was the one place where a lonely, isolated man could find companionship, news, and a temporary escape from the crushing monotony of his life. As central as alcohol was to saloon life, its partner, tobacco, was even more pervasive. It was used by nearly everyone, everywhere, in forms that would seem strange and often repulsive to us today. The air of the West wasn't just filled with dust, it was filled with the smoke and scent of tobacco. The most common form of tobacco use among the rugged men of the frontier was not the cigarette or the cigar, but chewing tobacco. You would purchase a plug of tobacco, a dense, dark, compressed brick of sweetened and cured tobacco leaves. You wouldn't smoke it. You'd bite off a chunk, or chaw, and tuck it into your cheek. As you worked, rode, or sat in the saloon, you would chew on this wad, releasing a steady stream of nicotine and dark, bitter juice. This juice, of course, had to go somewhere. And so, the act of spitting became a constant, almost artistic feature of daily life. The floors of saloons, train cars, and even some public buildings were punctuated by brass or earthenware spittoons, or gaboons. A man's skill was often judged by his ability to hit the spittoon from a distance with a clean, accurate stream of brown saliva. Of course, accuracy varied, especially after a few glasses of coffin varnish, and the floors around the spittoons were often a disgusting, sticky mess. This constant spitting was not considered rude, it was just a fact of life. For those who preferred to smoke, the cigar was a sign of status, enjoyed by bankers, politicians, and successful merchants. The common man, however, was more likely to smoke a pipe or roll his own cigarette. Pre-rolled cigarettes as we know them were a late addition to the frontier, becoming popular only towards the end of the 19th century with the invention of automated rolling machines. Before that, you would carry a small cloth bag of loose-leaf tobacco, like Bull Durham, and a packet of rolling papers. Rolling a cigarette with one hand while on horseback was a celebrated cowboy skill. There was no understanding of the health risks. In fact, many doctors believed tobacco had medicinal properties. It was thought to calm the nerves, aid in digestion, and even protect against diseases caused by bad air. Nicotine, the powerful stimulant at the heart of tobacco, provided a steady, low-level high that helped men endure the long monotonous hours of labor on the range or in the mines. It was a tool, a comfort, and a constant companion. The introduction of the mass-produced cigarette in the 1880s began to change the culture, making smoking easier, more accessible, and more appealing to a wider audience. But for most of the classic Wild West period, the defining image of tobacco use was the rugged cowboy with a chaw in his cheek and a practiced aim for the nearest spittoon. While men were finding community and poison in the saloon, a powerful counter-movement was brewing, fueled by the women who saw the devastating impact of alcohol on their families and their communities. This was the temperance movement, and it was not a quiet, polite affair. It was a holy war, waged with prayer, passion, and sometimes a hatchet. Imagine you are a woman on the frontier. Your husband, a good man when sober, spends his weekly wages at the saloon, coming home drunk, angry, and empty-handed. Your children go hungry. You live in constant fear of his drunken rages. You have no legal recourse. The law, the economy, and the social structure are all controlled by the very men who profit from the saloon. You are powerless. Or are you? In the 1870s, a movement known as the Women's Crusade swept across the country. Fed up with the destruction wrought by alcohol, groups of respectable, church-going women decided to take direct action. They would gather in front of a saloon, often in the cold or the rain, and they would begin to pray. They would sing hymns. They would kneel on the dusty street, their voices rising in a chorus of moral appeal. They would plead with the saloon owner to close his business and with the patrons to go home to their families. This was a radical act. For respectable women to leave the domestic sphere and create a public protest was shocking. They were often heckled, insulted, and sometimes even physically assaulted by angry saloon patrons. But they persisted, their passive resistance, a powerful form of moral theatre. And then there was Carrie Nation. She was not passive. A towering figure, usually dressed in stark black, Carrie Nation was a one-woman wrecking crew, a religious zealot who believed she was on a mission from God to destroy the saloon. She called her method hatchetation. Picture the scene in a Kansas saloon around the turn of the century. Men are drinking, gambling, lost in their usual haze. Suddenly, the swinging doors burst open, and in strides Carrie Nation, her face set in a grim mask of righteous fury. In her hand, she wields a hatchet. Before anyone can react, she begins her work. With powerful swings, she smashes the mirror behind the bar, sending shards of glass flying. She brings her hatchet down on the polished bar top, splintering the wood. She moves down the line, methodically destroying bottles of whiskey, kegs of beer, and gambling tables. She would often sing hymns as she worked, her voice rising above the sound of breaking glass. She was arrested over 30 times, but she became a national figure, a symbol of the temperance movement's militant wing. To saloon owners, she was a terrifying menace. To her followers, she was a modern-day prophet, doing God's work with a hardware store tool. The temperance movement was a complex and powerful force. It was driven by a genuine desire to combat the very real social ills of alcoholism and domestic violence. But it was also intertwined with nativism, a fear of the drinking cultures of German and Irish immigrants, and a desire to impose a specific brand of Protestant morality on the entire country. This strange, passionate, and sometimes violent crusade against the demon rum would eventually culminate in the national experiment of prohibition, but its roots lay in the desperate prayers of women kneeling in the dirt outside a frontier saloon, and the righteous fury of a woman with a hatchet in her hand. Beyond the laudanum bottle and the whiskey glass, there was another, more exotic world of altered states on the frontier. This was the world of smoked dreams, of substances that arrived from distant lands and were consumed in quiet, ritualistic settings. These drugs, particularly opium, carried with them an air of mystery, of foreignness, and increasingly of racial fear, leading to some of the first drug laws in American history. Let's travel to the bustling, labyrinthine streets of San Francisco's Chinatown in the 1880s, or to a remote mining camp in the mountains of Nevada, where Chinese laborers have built a small community. You are a journalist, an artist, or perhaps just a curious soul seeking an escape from the loud, aggressive world of the American saloon. You are looking for an opium den. You are led down a narrow alley, through an unmarked door, and into a different reality. The air inside is thick, not with the harsh sting of tobacco, but with a sweet, cloying, almost fruity smoke that hangs in the air like a heavy perfume. The room is dark, lit only by the soft glow of small oil lamps. It is quiet. The boisterous roar of the saloon is replaced by a deep, reverent silence, broken only by the gentle bubbling of water pipes and soft, muffled whispers. Men and a few women are reclining on wooden platforms or bunks that line the walls. They are not talking or gambling, they are focused, almost meditatively, on the ritual of smoking. This is not a quick, frantic high. It is a slow, deliberate process. An attendant prepares the pipe for you. He takes a small, dark, gummy pellet of chandu, or prepared opium, on the end of a long needle. He holds it over the flame of the oil lamp, roasting it carefully until it bubbles and swells. He then places the pellet into the tiny bowl of a long pipe, often made of bamboo with a ceramic bowl. You lie on your side, place your lips to the pipe, and inhale slowly as the attendant holds the bowl over the lamp. The smoke is smooth and warm. You inhale deeply, you hold it, you exhale. You repeat the process. After a few pipes, the effects begin to creep in. The world softens at the edges. A profound sense of physical and mental relaxation washes over you. All your worries, all your anxieties, all your physical pains dissolve into a state of supreme, languid indifference. You feel no desire to move, no desire to speak. You are content to simply lie there, drifting on a warm, timeless sea of tranquility. This is the dream of the opium pipe. Opium smoking was brought to the West by Chinese immigrants who came to work on the railroads and in the mines. For them, it was a traditional pastime, a way to socialize, relax after a grueling day of labor, and connect with their culture far from home. The opium den was their social club, their version of the saloon. But it didn't stay confined to the Chinese community. Disenchanted white Americans, artists, writers, prostitutes, and members of the bohemian underworld were drawn to the den's promise of a different kind of escape. They were tired of the violent, aggressive high of alcohol and sought the peaceful, introspective dreaminess of opium. To understand the story of America's first drug laws, you must first understand a foundational truth about the America of the late 19th century. It was a nation awash in narcotics, and almost all of them were legal. The country was swimming in opiates. Morphine, the powerful painkiller refined from opium, had been used so extensively to treat wounded soldiers during the Civil War that morphine addiction became known as the soldier's disease. Cocaine, isolated in the 1850s, was an ingredient in countless patent medicines and was famously included in the original formulation of Coca-Cola. But the true king of the 19th century pharmacopoeia was laudanum, a tincture of opium dissolved in alcohol. It was the great cure-all, the Swiss Army knife of Victorian medicine. You could buy it as easily as you could buy flour or coffee. It was given to teething infants to quiet their crying, to women to soothe female complaints and nervous conditions, and to anyone and everyone for coughs, diarrhea, pain, anxiety, and simple sleeplessness. Millions of Americans, particularly white, middle-class housewives, were quietly, legally, and often tragically addicted to the opiate bottle in their medicine cabinet. In this world where powerful narcotics were a normal part of daily life, a strange and pivotal event occurred. The United States government, for the first time in its history, decided to legislate against a drug. But it did not target the morphine that addicted its war heroes, or the laudanum that pacified its parlors. It aimed its full legal force at one specific substance, consumed in one specific way by one specific group of people. The story of America's first anti-drug law is not a story about public health. It is a story about race, fear, and the invention of a new kind of crime. Anatomy of a panic. As the Chinese population grew on the West Coast, so did their social institutions. In the crowded, vibrant Chinatowns of cities like San Francisco, men who were far from home, living in a hostile land without their families, created spaces for themselves. Among these were the opium dens. To the men who used them, these were social lounges, quiet places to gather after a long day of grueling labor, to speak their own language, to drink tea, and to smoke opium in the traditional way of their homeland, a brief, dreamlike respite from a harsh reality. But that is not how white America saw it. To understand the moral panic that erupted, you have to imagine yourself as a citizen of San Francisco in the 1870s, reading the lurid accounts in the penny press or a popular illustrated weekly like the National Police Gazette. The articles paint a terrifying picture. They are not journalistic accounts. They are works of feverish, racist fiction. The headlines scream from the page, "The Mongols' Grip on Our Fair City," or "Secret Vices of the Heathen Chinese." The stories describe the opium den not as a simple room, but as a sinister subterranean labyrinth. They tell of secret passages, of sweet, cloying smoke that stupefies the senses, of velvet cushions where dark, diabolical deeds are done. And at the center of this web is always the same figure, the sinister Chinese man with long fingernails and a malevolent, knowing smile. The most potent and repeated element of this fantasy was the theme of white slavery. The articles and political cartoons obsessively depicted innocent white women, often portrayed as young, blonde, and virginal, being lured into these dens. The story was always the same. She is tempted to take just one puff from the opium pipe. Instantly, her will is broken, her virtue dissolves, and she becomes the helpless thrall of her Chinese seducer, doomed to a life of debauchery and sexual servitude. This narrative was a powerful chemical reaction, combining the era's deepest anxieties into a single, explosive myth. It tapped into the economic fear of Chinese laborers, who were accused of taking jobs from white men. It played on the profound racial terror of the Yellow Peril, the idea that the Mongol hordes of Asia were a threat to white civilization. And it ignited sexual panic, the deep-seated fear of miscegenation, and the corruption of white womanhood. The image of the innocent white girl in the clutches of a heathen opium master was the perfect symbol for everything that seemed to threaten the established social order. The reality, of course, bore no resemblance to the fantasy. The Chinese population in San Francisco in the 1870s was relatively small, numbering around 12, 0 in a city of over 150, 0. It was also overwhelmingly male due to restrictive immigration policies, with a gender ratio in some counts as high as 20 men for every 1 woman. The idea of a widespread, systematic seduction of white women was a demographic and social absurdity. While some white men and women did frequent the dens, they were typically already part of the city's bohemian or vice underworld, not innocent maidens plucked from their homes. The panic was not a response to a real crisis. It was the deliberate creation of one. Opiates for me, but not for thee. The great hypocrisy at the heart of this panic is what makes it so significant. While the newspapers fumed about the opium fiend, millions of white Americans were opiate users, but their use was framed entirely differently. Consider the respectable middle-class housewife in a Boston brownstone. She suffers from nerves or neuralgia. Her doctor prescribes laudanum. She keeps the bottle on her bedside table and takes a spoonful in water whenever she feels unwell. Her addiction is seen as a private, medical tragedy. She is a patient, an object of pity. She purchases her drug from a clean, well-lit pharmacy from a man in a white coat. Consider the Civil War veteran living in rural Ohio. He lost a leg at Gettysburg and suffers from chronic, agonizing pain. He is addicted to the morphine that doctors gave him to manage his wounds. His addiction is the soldier's disease, a noble affliction. He is seen as a wounded hero, a victim of his patriotic sacrifice. His addiction is a medical problem deserving of the nation's sympathy. Now, contrast these figures with the Chinese laborer in San Francisco. He works 12 hours a day grading a railroad track or washing clothes. He has no family, no social standing. He goes to an opium den to smoke a pipe with his countrymen. His use is not framed as medical or tragic. It is framed as decadent, hedonistic, and conspiratorial. His method of ingestion smoking is seen as exotic and depraved, while the white user's method, drinking laudanum or injecting morphine, is medicalized. He doesn't go to a pharmacy, he goes to a den, a word that conjures images of wild animals and criminality. It is the same base substance opium, but it is filtered through the lens of race, class, and culture. One is a patient, the other is a criminal. One is a tragedy, the other is a menace. The law as a racial weapon. This moral panic, fueled by the press and opportunistic politicians like Dennis Kearney, whose Workingmen's Party ran on the slogan, "The Chinese must go," soon translated into law. In 1875, the city of San Francisco passed what is widely considered the first anti-drug law in the United States. But look closely at what the ordinance actually outlawed. It did not ban the sale or possession of opium. To do so would have inconvenienced the white citizens who used laudanum and the white businessmen who imported and sold opium to pharmacists. Instead, the ordinance specifically banned the keeping of or residing in any house, room, or place where opium is smoked. It was a masterpiece of targeted legislation. It did not make the drug illegal, it made the culture of the user illegal. It outlawed the social practice of the Chinese community while leaving the private, medicinal use of the white community untouched. The law's purpose had almost nothing to do with public health and everything to do with social control. It gave the police a legal pretext to raid Chinese homes and businesses at will. It allowed them to harass, arrest, and intimidate a population that the white majority feared and resented. It was a tool designed to make life as difficult as possible for the Chinese community, a legislative cudgel in a broader campaign of racial animosity that would culminate in the Federal Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. This San Francisco ordinance was a pivotal moment, a crossing of a legal Rubicon. It created the template for American drug policy for the next 150 years. The pattern was set. Identify a drug with a feared racial or social minority. create a media-fueled panic that links the drug to crime and sexual depravity, and then pass punitive laws that are selectively enforced against that group. This pattern would be repeated in the early 20th century with cocaine and African Americans, with marijuana and Mexican Americans, and throughout the long, painful history of the nation's war on drugs. While opium took center stage in this drama, other smoked substances existed in the margins. Hashish, the potent resin of the cannabis plant, was known but was far from common. It was associated with exotic, literary fantasies of the Orient, sometimes featured in Turkish smoking parlors in major cities, or as an ingredient in patent medicines and novelty cigarettes. But it lacked the one crucial ingredient needed to spark a moral panic, a visible, feared, and easily scapegoated immigrant community associated with its use. And so, hashish and cannabis remained a minor curiosity, a bohemian affectation, until a new wave of immigration and racial fear in the 20th century would thrust them into the spotlight, ready for their own starring role in America's next drug panic. The legacy of that 1,875 ordinance is long and poisonous. It was the moment America decided that a drug itself is not the issue, but rather the person using it. It established the principle of using drug laws not as a matter of public health, but as a weapon of social and racial control. The ghost of San Francisco's Chinatown dens and the cynical, racist logic that condemned them haunts the very foundation of American drug policy to this day. Beyond the plant-based substances, the 19th century was also the dawn of modern chemistry, which introduced a new class of volatile, intoxicating substances to the world: anesthetics. While intended for the operating table, drugs like ether and chloroform quickly found a recreational life of their own. Imagine you are a medical student or a young, educated person in a larger Western town in the 1870s. You and your friends are looking for a novel thrill. You might host an ether frolic. Someone would procure a can of diethyl ether, a highly flammable and volatile liquid used as an early anesthetic. The group would gather in a well-ventilated room, or, if they were careless, a poorly ventilated one. A handkerchief would be soaked with the liquid, and participants would take turns huffing the sweet, pungent fumes. The effect would be incredibly rapid and disorienting. A wave of lightheadedness, followed by a burst of giddy, uncontrollable laughter. You might feel a tingling numbness in your limbs and a sense of detachment from your body. The experience was short-lived, often lasting only a few minutes, leading users to huff repeatedly. This state of giddy intoxication often led to loud, foolish behavior, hence the term frolic. Chloroform, another early anesthetic, was also used recreationally, though it was far more dangerous. It was a powerful central nervous system depressant. A few drops on a rag could induce a rapid, dreamlike state of intoxication, but the line between a recreational dose and a fatal overdose was terrifyingly thin. Too much chloroform could easily lead to respiratory failure, cardiac arrest, and death. The recreational use of these anesthetics was a strange fad, mostly confined to educated or medical circles where people had access to them. It wasn't a widespread practice like drinking or laudanum use, but it represented a new and modern form of getting high. It was a chemical high, born from the laboratory rather than the field. This huffing of industrial fumes was a far cry from the sacred rituals of peyote or the languid dreams of the opium den. It was a quick, dizzying and dangerous plunge into oblivion, a strange footnote in the West's long history of intoxication and a foreshadowing of the synthetic drug problems of the future. Long before the arrival of alcohol, opium, or cocaine, the indigenous peoples of the American West had a deep and ancient relationship with psychoactive plants. These were not substances for recreation or escape. They were sacred medicines, powerful tools for healing, spiritual vision, and connection with the divine. The use of these plants was a deeply ritualized and respected practice, one that would eventually clash with the new world being built by the white settlers. Imagine, for a moment, that you are a person of the plains, not in the mythic, sun-drenched past, but in the brutal, unforgiving reality of the late 19th century. Imagine you are Comanche, or Kiowa, or Cheyenne, the world your grandparents knew, a world that felt as permanent as the sky itself, has not just changed. It has been shattered into a million unrecognizable pieces. The foundation of your entire existence, the buffalo, is gone. You remember the stories from your childhood, or perhaps you can even remember the sight yourself. the earth trembling under the weight of a million thundering hooves. A dark, moving sea of life that provided everything: food, shelter, clothing, tools, spiritual power. Now you see their bones. Great, white piles of skulls bleaching under the same sun, monuments to a genocide. In their place, you eat government rations, salty pork, gritty flour, stringy beef, a bland and spiritless substitute that sickens your body and shames your soul. The land, once a boundless expanse for you to follow the herds, has been carved up by lines on a map you cannot read. You are confined to a reservation, a fraction of your former territory, often on the poorest soil. The horizon, which once symbolized infinite possibility, now represents the boundary of your prison. Worst of all, perhaps, is the war being waged on your children. You watch as they are taken, sometimes by force, and sent to distant government boarding schools in places like Carlisle, Pennsylvania. The stated goal is to kill the Indian and save the man. They cut their hair, take their traditional clothes, forbid them from speaking their own language, and punish them for practicing their own beliefs. They are being taught to be ashamed of who they are, to be ashamed of you. With every child sent away, you feel a piece of your people's future being deliberately, methodically erased. In this new world of wounds, a world of poverty, of alcoholism born from despair, of diseases like smallpox and tuberculosis that your medicine cannot fight, of a deep and crushing spiritual emptiness, you are desperate. Your old ceremonies, so tied to the buffalo hunt and a life of freedom, feel hollow. The ghost dance, with its promise of a restored world, ended in the massacre at Wounded Knee. The Christian missionaries offer you their God, but he seems to be the same God of the soldiers and the agents who have taken everything from you. Where do you turn for hope? How do you find the strength to walk on? It is in this time of profound crisis that a new path reveals itself, spreading quietly from tribe to tribe across the southern plains. It is a ceremony centered around a small, humble cactus, a sacrament that offers not an escape from reality, but a way to find meaning within it. It is the peyote meeting, the sacred circle. The ceremony begins at dusk. You leave behind the square, wooden houses the government has built for you, and enter a different kind of dwelling, a tipi. The tipi itself is a sacred space, a microcosm of the universe. Its circular shape represents the unity of all things. Its poles reach from the earth to the spirit world, and the smoke hole at its peak is an opening to the heavens. You enter with reverence, moving clockwise to your designated place, taking your seat on the earth. The inside is dark, save for a carefully tended fire that burns in the center. The fire is not for warmth alone. It is a living entity, a connection to the Creator. In front of it, the spiritual leader of the ceremony, the roadman, has built a crescent-shaped altar from moist earth. This is the peyote road, the path of a righteous life that you will walk tonight. Upon the center of the altar rests a single, perfect peyote button, the Father Peyote, or Chief, who will preside over the meeting. The roadman is not a priest set apart from his people. He is a man from your community, someone who has struggled with the same despair as you. He has walked this peyote road many times and has found a way to live a good life, and tonight his role is to guide you. He begins the ceremony with prayer, his words offered not in a booming voice, but with a humble, heartfelt sincerity. He lights a cedar or sage smudge, and the sweet, purifying smoke is fanned over each person with an eagle feather, cleansing you of the bitterness and sorrow you carry in from the outside world. Then the music starts. The roadman takes up the instruments. First, the rattle, a gourd filled with seeds or stones, its sharp hissing sound like the coming of rain or the whisper of the wind. Then, his assistant begins to play the water drum. This is not like any other drum you have heard. It is a small iron kettle, half filled with water, with a moistened hide stretched tightly across its top. When struck, it produces a unique, resonant, and deeply resonant sound, thump, 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 a sound universally described as the heartbeat of the earth, the heartbeat of your mother, the very pulse of life itself. The roadman begins to sing. The peyote songs are high and clear, sung in a vocabulary of spiritual syllables rather than narrative words. They are prayers in their purest form, melodies that have been passed down to guide the spirit on its journey. The instruments are passed around the circle, from person to person. When it is your turn, you will sing 4 songs, your voice joining the heartbeat of the drum. your prayer rising with the smoke toward the heavens. The bitter sacrament. At a designated time in the ceremony, the roadman passes around a bag containing the sacrament itself. You are given a few buttons of the peyote cactus. You look at it in your palm. It is a small, humble thing, a greenish-grey, spineless cactus, fuzzy like a piece of buckskin. It looks unassuming, yet you have been told it is the flesh of God, a sacred medicine that allows you to speak directly to the Creator. With a prayer in your heart, you put it in your mouth. The taste is overwhelming. It is an incredible, profound bitterness, a taste that seems to coat your entire being. It is the taste of the deep earth, of raw, concentrated life. It is not pleasant. It is a challenge. Many find it difficult to swallow, but you know it is a necessary first step. The drumming and singing continue, the heartbeat of the ceremony pulsing through the night. As the minutes and then hours pass, the medicine begins to work within you. The first effect is often physical. A wave of nausea may wash over you. You may need to leave the teepee to vomit. But this is not seen as a bad side effect. It is understood as a vital part of the healing. You are purging yourself. You are expelling the physical sickness from your body, but also the spiritual sickness, the anger, the grief, the despair, the effects of the white man's alcohol. It is a necessary and welcome cleansing, leaving you feeling empty, light, and ready to receive the Spirit. The journey of visions. As you settle back into the circle, the physical discomfort fades, replaced by something extraordinary. The world around you, illuminated by the single sacred fire, begins to glow with an inner light. This is not a wild, drunken hallucination. It is a heightening, a clarification of your senses. You look at the fire, and the glowing coals seem to be made of impossibly beautiful, living jewels. You close your eyes, and intricate, kaleidoscopic patterns of brilliant color dance in the darkness, perfectly synchronized to the rhythm of the drum. The visions begin. They are not frightening. They are deeply personal and spiritually significant. You might see an eagle, the Creator's messenger, soaring through your mind, and you feel a sense of profound strength and clarity. You might see a vision of the great buffalo herds, not as a memory of loss, but as a reminder of the enduring power of your people. You might see the face of a grandmother who passed on long ago, and instead of feeling grief, you feel her presence, her love, her reassurance that all is well. The medicine is a key that unlocks the door between the worlds. The deepest effect is the sense of connection. The boundaries of your own ego, your personal anxieties and petty concerns begin to dissolve. You look around the tipi at the faces of your brothers and sisters, their features illuminated by the firelight, and you are filled with an overwhelming love for them. You are not just a collection of broken individuals. You are one people, one heart, one family. You feel your connection to the earth beneath you, to the fire before you, to the vast, starry sky above the smoke hole of the tipi. And above all, you feel a direct, unmediated connection to the Great Spirit. There is no priest, no book, no intermediary. There is only you, the medicine, and God. In this sacred space, you feel a sense of peace and understanding that you thought you had lost forever. The teachings of the Peyote Road emphasize that this experience should lead you to live a better life, to be sober, industrious, honest, and devoted to your family. The purpose of the journey is not to get high, it is to get right with the world. The clash of worlds. This powerful healing ceremony was a direct threat to the agents of colonization. To the white missionaries, it was a horrifying pagan ritual. They heard the all-night drumming and singing and imagined a savage orgy. They heard of the visions and were convinced it was devil worship. They could not conceive of a plant as a sacred sacrament. To them, it was simply a dangerous drug, and its users were dope fiends. The peyote ceremony was a direct competitor to the church, offering a form of spirituality that was indigenous, personal, and empowering everything they were trying to stamp out. To the government agents, the peyote religion was a form of resistance. It brought people from different, often rival, tribes together in a shared spiritual experience, fostering a pan-Indian identity that threatened the government's divide-and-conquer strategy. It taught a moral code that was independent of their control. It gave a broken people a renewed sense of hope, dignity, and cultural pride, qualities that made them harder to assimilate and control. And so, they worked tirelessly to have the peyote religion banned. They passed laws, arrested roadmen, and confiscated the sacred medicine. This clash of worldviews, one that saw a humble cactus as a divine gift, a flesh of God to be used for healing and communion. The other that saw it only as a dangerous intoxicant to be eradicated was a microcosm of the larger cultural war being waged for the very soul of the West. For a people whose world had been destroyed, the peyote ceremony was a way to rebuild it from the inside out, finding a path to survival not in fighting the new world, but in finding a new way to be whole within it. While peyote offered a path to spiritual clarity, the West was home to other, far more dangerous psychoactive plants. Chief among these was Datura stramonium, known colloquially as Jimson weed or thorn apple. This common, unassuming weed with its trumpet-like white flowers contained a powerful and unpredictable cocktail of deliriant alkaloids. Unlike peyote, which heightens awareness, Datura obliterates it. Consuming its seeds or brewing its leaves into a tea would induce a state of true, terrifying delirium. You would not just see visions, you would enter them completely, unable to distinguish between hallucination and reality. You might have a conversation with a person who wasn't there, or try to pick up objects that didn't exist. Your memory of the experience would be fragmented and dreamlike, if you remembered it at all. Some native cultures used datura in highly controlled ritual contexts, particularly in adolescent initiation rites, but its use was always considered incredibly dangerous. An incorrect dose could easily lead to overheating, heart failure, and death. For white settlers, encounters with Jimson weed were usually accidental and disastrous. A group of soldiers might mistakenly cook and eat its leaves, thinking it was a form of spinach, an incident that gave the plant its name in Jamestown. The result would be days of bizarre, psychotic behavior. Children might accidentally eat the seeds and fall into a delirious state, their parents watching in horror, helpless to bring them back to reality. Jimson weed was the dark, chaotic side of the West's natural pharmacopoeia, a powerful reminder that not all plants that alter the mind do so with benevolent intentions. It was a true poison of the earth, a trip from which you might never return. For much of the 19th century, the American West was a landscape of unrestrained chemical freedom. You could consume almost any substance you desired with little to no legal or social consequence. But this era of open access had a dark and inevitable outcome, a widespread, silent epidemic of addiction. As the century drew to a close, society was forced to confront the aftermath of its long love affair with drugs, leading to a world of horrifying cures and the very first steps toward federal regulation. What did it mean to be an addict in the Wild West? It was not a medical diagnosis. It was a moral failing, a sign of a weak will and a corrupt character. The term addict was not yet in common use. Instead, you were an opium eater, a morphine fiend, a drunkard, or a dope fiend. You were seen not as sick, but as sinful. Imagine you are the morphine fiend, the Civil War veteran who now cannot get through a day without the jab of the hypodermic needle. Your life, once defined by honor and duty, has shrunk to a singular, desperate focus, obtaining your next fix. You might still be able to hold down a job, to maintain the facade of a normal life. But your health is deteriorating. You are gaunt, your skin has a pale, waxy pallor, your pupils are perpetually pinned. You suffer from chronic constipation, a common side effect of opiates. Your life is a cycle of brief, numb relief, followed by the creeping dread of withdrawal. Every morning begins with the ritual of preparing the needle, a moment of both desperation and anticipated peace. Or perhaps you are the respectable housewife, now a slave to your laudanum bottle. You hide it at the back of your cupboard, taking swigs in secret. Your family notices you've become forgetful, drowsy, and emotionally distant. You neglect your chores, your children. You are living in a private, foggy hell, consumed by shame and a craving you cannot control. You live in fear of the bottle running empty, a fear that dictates your trips to town and your strained interactions with the pharmacist, who has begun to look at you with suspicion. There was no support system, no rehab as we know it. You were on your own, trapped with your habit. Your addiction was a family secret, a source of profound shame that was hidden from public view at all costs. The only help available was often judgment from the local preacher or social ostracism from your community. The fiend was a figure to be pitied, feared, and ultimately condemned. As the problem of addiction became more visible, a new industry emerged to profit from it, the private addiction asylum. These institutions advertised miraculous cures for alcoholism and drug habits, promising to restore patients to sobriety and moral vigor in a matter of weeks. The reality inside these sanatoriums was often a chamber of horrors. One of the most famous and widely practiced treatments was the Keeley cure, developed by Dr. Leslie Keeley. Thousands of addicts flocked to Keeley institutes across the country. The cornerstone of the treatment was the injection of a secret formula 4 times a day. Keeley claimed his double chloride of gold formula would chemically eliminate the craving for alcohol or drugs. In reality, it was a worthless concoction of gold, strychnine, and other substances that had no therapeutic effect. Imagine you've been sent to a Keeley Institute. The real cure begins. You are forced into abrupt, unmedicated withdrawal. For the alcoholic, this means days of delirium tremens, the DTs, shaking, sweating, and terrifying hallucinations. For the opiate addict, it's a descent into a living hell of muscle cramps, vomiting, diarrhea, and a pain so profound it feels like your bones are on fire. All the while, you are forced to adhere to a strict schedule of meals, walks, and lectures on the importance of willpower. The cure was a combination of boot camp discipline and cold turkey agony. Other institutions employed even more torturous methods. The water cure, or hydrotherapy, was a popular treatment. An addict might be forcibly wrapped in freezing cold, wet sheets for hours at a time, a process called packing, or they could be subjected to powerful jets of high-pressure water, which felt like being beaten. These were not gentle spa treatments. They were shocks to the system, designed to purge the body of its cravings through sheer physical misery. The patient was essentially being tortured into sobriety. For those who couldn't afford a private asylum, a cure might be purchased through the mail. These were often just as fraudulent as the patent medicines that caused the addiction in the first place. Some opium cures actually contained large amounts of opium or morphine, designed to transfer the addict's dependence to a new, proprietary product. Others contained nothing but sugar or bitter herbs. The world of addiction treatment was as unregulated and dangerous as the world of drugs itself. As the 19th century bled into the 20th, the tide began to turn. The era of unchecked chemical freedom was coming to an end. A new awareness was dawning about the dangers of the substances that had saturated American life for so long. This change was driven by a coalition of forces. The muckraking journalists of the progressive era began to expose the fraudulent claims and dangerous ingredients of the patent medicine industry. In a landmark series of articles for Collier's Weekly, titled The Great American Fraud, Samuel Hopkins Adams meticulously detailed how these popular remedies were filled with alcohol, opiates, and other dangerous drugs, all while making false and impossible claims. His work shocked the nation. At the same time, the Women's Christian Temperance Union, WCTU, had become one of the most powerful political lobbying groups in the country, pushing relentlessly for the prohibition of alcohol. The racist fears surrounding Chinese opium dens were fueling calls for national drug laws, and the medical profession itself was finally beginning to reckon with the addictive nature of the opiates and cocaine they had once prescribed so freely. The frontier itself was closing. The wild, ungoverned spaces were being tamed by railroads, telegraphs, and federal law. Society was becoming more organized, more regulated, more civilized. This societal shift brought with it a new desire to control not just land and people, but the substances they consume. This growing movement culminated in the passage of the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906. This landmark piece of legislation didn't ban drugs, but it was the first step toward transparency. For the first time, it required manufacturers to list the active ingredients and their quantities on their product labels. Suddenly, that bottle of Mrs. Plost, Winslow's soothing syrup, had to admit that it contained 1 grain of morphine per fluid ounce. That brain tonic had to list its cocaine content. This simple act of labeling was revolutionary. It stripped away the magic and mystery, revealing the narcotics for what they were. It allowed the public to see what they were actually giving to their children and consuming themselves. It marked the beginning of the end for the patent medicine industry and the start of a new era of federal regulation. The open frontier of the mind was being fenced in. The age of chemical innocence, if it ever truly existed, was over. The complex, often contradictory, and deeply troubled relationship between America and its drugs, a relationship forged in the unregulated wilderness of the Wild West, was about to enter its modern, and even more complicated, chapter. As we step back from this hazy, intoxicating, and often heartbreaking history, the simple image of the whiskey-drinking cowboy dissolves into a far more complex and troubling panorama. The Wild West was not a society with a drinking problem. It was a society saturated with a vast and varied menu of mind-altering substances consumed by every demographic for every conceivable reason. The respectable housewife sipping her laudanum, the intellectual boosting his brain with coca wine, the inconsolable baby quieted with morphine syrup, the Chinese laborer dreaming in an opium den, the Native American seeking vision with sacred peyote. These were the true faces of getting high on the frontier. Their experiences reveal a world where the lines between medicine, vice, spiritualism, and daily life were hopelessly, and often tragically, blurred. The strange ways they used these substances were not strange to them. They were logical responses to a world of immense pain, both physical and emotional. In an era without effective medicine, opiates offered a powerful, if perilous, relief from suffering. In a world of grueling labor and limited opportunity, cocaine offered a fleeting sense of power and brilliance. In a society grappling with profound loss and existential uncertainty, alcohol and opium offered a temporary escape. The legacy of this era is still with us. It can be seen in our ongoing struggles with addiction, in our complex and often contradictory drug laws, and in the persistent, racialized fears that continue to shape our public health policies. The Wild West was the first great, unregulated American experiment with psychoactive substances, and its consequences have echoed down through the generations. It reminds us that the human desire to alter consciousness, to escape pain, and to seek transcendence is not a modern phenomenon. It is a fundamental part of the human story. The people of the West, with their tonics, their pipes, and their prayers, were simply navigating that ancient frontier with the limited and dangerous tools they had at their disposal. Their story is a sobering, cautionary tale, a testament to the incredible resilience of the human spirit, and a reminder that the search for relief, in any era, is a journey fraught with both miracle and peril.